My name is James Carter, and my family thought they could bury me, erasing me from my grandmother's will to hide their filthy lies. But a single USB drive and a locked safe she left behind detonated their world, exposing secrets they'd kill to keep. Before I unravel how their greed turned to ash, drop a comment with where you're watching from. I want to know who's out there with me. This all kicked off on a rainy Seattle morning, the kind where the sky's a bruised gray and the air smells of wet asphalt and coffee. I was elbow deep in the guts of a '67 Mustang in my auto repair shop, the clang of wrenches and hum of a radio filling the cramped space. Grease stained my hands. My old Ford Bronco sat out back, more dense than paint, and my life was simple. Fix cars, pay bills, sleep in the loft above the shop. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, something my family wouldn't know if it bit them. Then my phone pinged on the workbench, cutting through the rhythm of my work. An email from a downtown law firm, cold and formal. Mr. James Carter, your presence is required at the reading of Evelyn Carter's last will and testament, 3 p.m. today. Hayes and Partners. Urgent. My heart stopped. Evelyn, my grandmother, had been gone a month, and my family, my father Charles, mother Diane, brothers Ethan and Lucas, hadn't said a word. No call, no text, just a void where family should have been. They'd shut me out, smeared my name, and made it clear I was dead to them. So why this? Why now? My gut screamed trap, but the thought of Evelyn, the one person who ever saw me, pulled me toward that law firm like a magnet. I wiped my hands, grabbed my keys, and stepped into a storm I never saw coming. The rain was still hammering down as I locked up the shop, the neon sign flickering above the door. My name's James Carter, and that Seattle morning felt heavier than the clouds overhead. My auto repair shop, Carter's Classics, was my sanctuary. 2 bays crammed with tools, oil cans, and the skeletons of vintage cars I brought back to life. The air was thick with the sharp tang of motor oil and the faint sweetness of rust, a smell that grounded me. My hands, calloused and stained, knew every bolt and gasket. This was my world, built from sweat and stubborn pride, a far cry from the glittering lies my family chased. I lived in a loft above the shop, a 400-square-foot box with a sagging couch, a hot plate, and a mattress that creaked louder than my old Ford Bronco. That truck, parked out back, was a patchwork of dents and faded blue paint, but its engine purred like a contented cat. I'd wake at dawn, wrench on cars until my shoulders burned, then cook a simple dinner, usually eggs or canned soup. Nights were quiet, just me and a dog-eared copy of On the Road or the low hum of a Mariners game on the radio. Money was tight, but after the chaos of the last year, scraping by felt like a badge of honor. I'd carved out a life that was mine, free from the poison of my family's greed. 6 months ago, I'd been part of their world, or at least I'd tried to be. Charles, my father, ran a slick crypto investment firm, all glass offices and fake smiles. My mother, Diane, played the perfect socialite, hosting charity galas while skimming the profits. My brothers, Ethan and Lucas, were worse, running a car theft ring out of Grandma Evelyn's warehouse, stripping classics like the ones I restored. I'd seen through their facade, and when I called it out, they didn't just push me away. They obliterated me. No invites, no calls, just a vicious campaign to paint me as the family failure. A washed-up mechanic with a chip on his shoulder. That email from Hayes and Partners sat like a lead weight in my gut. Evelyn's death had gutted me, but my family's silence hurt worse. They'd erased me from her obituary, her memorial, her life. I'd spent nights parked outside her old penthouse, staring at the dark windows, whispering apologies for not being there when she passed. Now, this summons to her will reading felt like a cruel joke. Was it Ethan and Lucas cooking up some new way to twist the knife, or something else? Evelyn had always been my anchor, her sharp wit, her warm hugs, her belief in me. If there was even a chance this was real, I had to know. I climbed into the Bronco, the engine rumbling to life, and pointed it toward downtown Seattle. The rain blurred the windshield, but my resolve was crystal clear. Whatever waited at that law firm, I was ready to face it. The Seattle rain pelted my Bronco's windshield as I wove through downtown traffic, the city's steel and glass towers looming like silent judges. I'm James Carter, and that email from Hayes and Partners was burning a hole in my mind. My grandmother Evelyn's will reading, set for 3 p.m. today, was the last place I expected to be invited. My family, Charles, Diane, Ethan, Lucas, had spent the last month acting like I didn't exist. No word about her passing, no mention in the polished obituary they plastered online. They'd erased me, just like they'd tried to erase the truth about their lies. So why this? Why now? The email was cold, clinical, like a court summons. Mr. James Carter, your presence is required at the reading of Evelyn Carter's last will and testament. Hayes and Partners, 17th floor, Columbia Center. Urgent. No warmth, no explanation, just a time and place. I'd read it 3 times back at the shop, my hands still greasy from a carburetor rebuild, my heart thudding like a misfired engine. Evelyn had been my rock, her penthouse filled with books, jazz records, and stories of her days running a women's shelter. When she died, I found out through a stranger's ex-post, a grainy photo of her memorial I wasn't invited to. The pain of that cut deeper than any family fight. Now, this message felt like a trap. Ethan and Lucas were masters at cruel games. Maybe they'd forged it to humiliate me, to laugh as I showed up to nothing. Or worse, maybe Charles had some legal trick to tie me to their scams, pin their dirt on me. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as I parked outside the Columbia Center, its sleek black facade glinting through the drizzle. The clock read 2:45 p.m. I could turn around, head back to my shop, back to the safe hum of wrenches and oil. But Evelyn's voice echoed in my head from our last talk, months ago, before they blocked my calls. Don't let them break you, James. You're stronger than their lies. I took a breath, the air sharp with rain and resolve, and stepped out of the Bronco. Whatever this was, trap, trick, or truth, I was walking into it with my eyes wide open. Hey, it's James Carter. And as I stood outside that gleaming Columbia Center, the rain soaking through my jacket, my mind wasn't on the will reading. It was stuck 6 months back, on a Christmas Eve that tore my world apart. To understand why my family wanted me gone, why they'd erased me from Grandma Evelyn's life, you need to know what happened that night. It wasn't just a fight, it was a detonation, exposing the rot they'd hidden for years. Picture a swanky Seattle mansion, my parents' place in Madison Park, all decked out for their annual Christmas Eve gala. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, a jazz quartet played, and the air smelled of pine and expensive perfume. The guest list was a who's who of the city's elite, politicians, CEOs, and Evelyn's old friends from her charity days. My mother, Diane, floated through the crowd in a red velvet gown, playing the perfect hostess. My father, Charles, held court by the fireplace, his Rolex glinting as he pitched his latest crypto scheme. My brothers, Ethan and Lucas, worked the room, all charm and sharp suits, but I knew the truth. Beneath the polish, they were vultures. I was there, feeling like an outsider in my own family, my flannel shirt and work boots out of place among the tuxes. Evelyn sat quietly at the head of the table, her silver hair catching the candlelight, her eyes sharp but tired. She'd been quieter since her health started fading, but she still had a fire in her I clung to. Dinner was a performance. Diane gushing about her hospital charity gala, Charles bragging about doubling clients' investments. Then he mentioned the Hendersons, our old neighbors, retirees who trusted him with their savings. "They're set for life now," he said, swirling his wine. "Beach house in Maui, the works." My blood boiled. I'd seen Mrs. Henderson at the grocery store a week before, her hands shaking as she counted pennies for bread. No beach house, just a foreclosed home and a broken spirit. I set my fork down, the clink cutting through the chatter. "That's a lie, Dad," I said, my voice low but steady. The room froze. Charles's smile faltered, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. "What did you say?" he growled. I stood my chair, scraping the hardwood. "The Hendersons lost everything. You funneled their money into your Ponzi scheme, churned their accounts for commissions. They're broke because of you." Gasps rippled through the guests. Diane's face went pale, her wine glass trembling. Ethan, always the hothead, lunged across the table. "You jealous loser," he spat. "You're just mad you're stuck fixing junk cars while we're building empires." I didn't flinch. I turned to Diane. "And you, Mom, that gala, you skimmed 30 grand from the hospital's cancer ward fund. I saw the bank transfer to your offshore account." Her eyes flashed with panic, but she played the victim, clutching her pearls. "James, how could you? This is Christmas." I kept going, my voice rising. "Ethan, Lucas, you're running a car theft ring out of Evelyn's warehouse. Stolen classics, chopped up for parts. I found the VIN numbers in your emails." The room erupted. Guests whispered, horrified. Evelyn's face was stone, but her hands gripped the table, knuckles white. Charles roared, "You're done here." Ethan shoved me toward the door, his fist grazing my jaw. Lucas grabbed my collar, snarling, "You're no brother of mine." Diane wailed for the guests, spinning it like I'd lost my mind. They threw me out into the snow, my father's voice booming, "You're dead to us." The fallout was brutal. They spread lies on social media. Ethan posted about my mental breakdown. Diane called me unstable to her church group. They blocked my calls, barred me from Evelyn's penthouse. A week later, a sheriff served me a restraining order, claiming I'd threatened Evelyn. It was fiction, built on their perjury, but it kept me away. The last time I saw her, she'd slipped me a note. "Truth is your shield, James. Hold fast." That note was all I had left as I stood outside that law firm, the rain hiding my tears. Christmas Eve had cost me everything, but it lit a fire they couldn't extinguish. It's James Carter, and as I pushed through the heavy glass doors of Hayes & Partners on the 17th floor of Seattle's Columbia Center, the air felt thick, like stepping into a courtroom where the verdict was already written. The sleek law office screamed money, marble floors, modern art, a view of Puget Sound through floor-to-ceiling windows, but all I could feel was the weight of my family's hatred, waiting to crush me. The receptionist, her smile tight, pointed me to a conference room down the hall. My boots echoed on the polished floor, each step pulling me deeper into the trap I'd feared since that email hit my inbox. Inside, they were already assembled, a pack of wolves in designer suits and silk dresses. My father, Charles, sat at the head of a long mahogany table, his silver hair slicked back, exuding the smug confidence of a man who'd already won. My mother, Diane, perched beside him, clutching a stack of papers like a shield, her lips pursed in a perfect mask of disdain. Ethan and Lucas, my brothers, lounged in their chairs, smirking at their phones, probably texting about how they'd spend their inheritance. My sister-in-law, Natalie, Ethan's wife, scrolled through her tablet, her diamond earrings catching the light. They looked like a boardroom ready to carve up a fortune. Evelyn's penthouse, her yacht, her millions. And me? I was the unwanted guest, the grease-stained mechanic who didn't belong. The room went dead silent as I walked in, their heads snapping up. Ethan's smirk vanished, replaced by a scowl. "What the hell is he doing here?" he barked, slamming his phone on the table. Lucas stood, his chair screeching. "This is a family matter, James. Get out." Charles raised a hand, his voice booming with false calm. "Sit down, boys. Let's not make a scene." But his eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto me. "James, you weren't invited for a reason. We've already handled Evelyn's assets. Her penthouse, her investments, her art collection. It's done. You're here out of some misplaced courtesy, I presume." Diane leaned forward, her tone dripping with venom disguised as pity. "Really, James? Showing up like this? After all you've done? We've got documents signed by Evelyn herself, proving she wasn't in her right mind. Dementia, poor thing. She didn't even remember you at the end." She slid a folder across the table, its edges crisp, filled with what I knew were forgeries. My stomach churned. They'd planned this, built a lie to erase me completely, to steal what was Evelyn's and call it theirs. I opened my mouth to fire back, but a new voice cut through, steady and commanding. Mr. Hayes, Evelyn's lawyer, stood at the far end of the table. He was in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a quiet authority that made the room shrink. "Mr. Carter," he said, looking straight at Charles, "James's presence isn't courtesy. It's essential." The word landed like a grenade. Diane's grip on her papers tightened, her knuckles whitening. Ethan let out a sharp laugh, but it was nervous, brittle. "Essential," he mocked. "For what? To embarrass himself again?" Mr. Hayes didn't flinch. He adjusted his glasses, his gaze sweeping the room. "Evelyn's will is clear. James is required for today's proceedings, and no one else will dictate otherwise." He placed a sleek laptop on the table, its presence ominous. Like a loaded gun. Charles's face twitched, a crack in his armor. "This is absurd," he snapped. "We've seen the will. The one from 3 years ago. It splits everything between me, the boys, and Diane. If there's some new nonsense, it's invalid. Evelyn was sick, confused. We'll prove it." I stood frozen, my heart pounding. Their lies were suffocating, but Hayes's calm certainty was a lifeline. The forged documents, their smug assurance. It was all a house of cards, and I could feel it wobbling. Natalie finally looked up from her tablet, her voice icy. "Let's just get this over with. Whatever pittance Evelyn left him, we'll mail it. He's wasting our time." But the air had shifted. A shadow of doubt flickered in their eyes, a fear they couldn't hide. Why was I essential? What did Hayes know that they didn't? The room felt like a powder keg, and that laptop was the match. "Hey, it's James Carter," and in that sterile conference room at Hayes & Partners, with my family's eyes boring into me like daggers. The air crackled with tension. Their forged documents, their smug lies about Grandma Evelyn's dementia, it all hung heavy, a noose they thought they'd slipped around my neck. But Mr. Hayes, the lawyer with the steady voice and steely eyes, wasn't fazed. He opened that sleek laptop on the mahogany table, and the room seemed to hold its breath. "Evelyn anticipated your claims," he said, his tone calm but laced with an edge that made Charles flinch. "She left a video statement, recorded in her penthouse, notarized, with a court stenographer present. She wanted her truth to be undeniable." My father, Charles, scoffed, but his hands betrayed him, trembling slightly on the table. Diane's perfectly manicured nails dug into her forged folder. Ethan and Lucas exchanged a glance, their smirks gone, replaced by something I'd never seen on them before: fear. Mr. Hayes pressed play, and Evelyn's face filled the screen. She sat in her penthouse, Puget Sound glittering behind her through floor-to-ceiling windows. Her silver hair was pulled back, her posture regal, but her eyes burned with a fierce clarity that silenced the room. She wore the sapphire brooch I'd given her for her 80th birthday, the one Diane swore she'd lost. My throat tightened. This was no frail, confused woman. "Hello, my family," Evelyn began, her voice steady, cutting through the room like a blade. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. I'm not here to mourn with you. I've said my goodbyes to those who mattered. This is about truth, something you've twisted for too long." She leaned forward, her gaze piercing the camera, as if seeing each of them. Charles, Diane, Ethan, Lucas. "Let's start with you, Charles. Your crypto empire? A Ponzi scheme. You preyed on my friends, the Hendersons, the Wilsons, retirees who trusted you. I have their bank statements, the real ones, showing millions drained. My private investigator tracked every cent to your offshore accounts." Charles made a strangled sound, his face blotchy. Evelyn didn't pause. "Diane, my dear daughter-in-law, so pious at your hospital galas. $30,000 from the cancer ward fund went missing, and 2 weeks later, you leased a private jet. The bank records don't lie, and neither do I." Diane gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, but Evelyn's eyes shifted. "Ethan and Lucas, you turned my warehouse into a chop shop, stealing vintage cars, some from veterans' families. I have surveillance footage, VIN numbers, and buyer receipts. You thought I was too old to notice?" My brothers sank in their chairs, Lucas's face ashen, Ethan's fists clenched. Evelyn's voice softened, but not with kindness, with resolve. "I hired a PI 6 months ago after James opened my eyes at that Christmas Eve disaster. Every secret you buried, I dug up. The evidence, bank records, videos, sworn statements, is locked in a safe, ready to go to the FBI if you challenge my will." She paused, her eyes finding me through the screen. "James, you told the truth when no one else would. You stood alone, and they tried to destroy you for it. I'm so proud of you." The video froze, Evelyn's face still on the screen, her strength radiating. The room was chaos without sound. Charles's jaw worked silently. Diane's papers crumpled in her grip. Ethan muttered curses, and Lucas stared at the table, sweat beading on his forehead. Natalie, my sister-in-law, dropped her tablet, the clatter echoing. Mr. Hayes closed the laptop, his voice cutting through the silence. "Evelyn was of sound mind, as a psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Margaret Voss, Seattle's top neurologist, confirms. Her evidence is ironclad. You can't outrun this." My heart pounded, not with fear, but with a strange, fierce joy. Evelyn hadn't just seen me. She'd fought for me, outsmarted them all. The USB was her voice from beyond, and that safe? It was a ticking bomb under their lies. My family's empire was crumbling, and I was the one left standing. It's James Carter, and in that Seattle law office, the air was electric, like the moment before a lightning strike. Evelyn's video had just ripped through my family's lies, exposing their crimes. Charles' Ponzi scheme, Diane's charity theft, Ethan and Lucas's car theft ring. Their faces were a gallery of panic. Charles's jaw clenched, Diane's eyes wide with dread, my brothers slumping like cornered animals. Mr. Hayes, the lawyer, stood calm at the head of the mahogany table, his wire-rimmed glasses glinting under the fluorescent lights. He reached for a thick manila envelope, its wax seal gleaming like a promise of judgment. "Now," he said, his voice steady, "we come to Evelyn Carter's last will and testament." The room held its breath as he broke the seal with a sharp crack, pulling out a heavy document. My family leaned forward, desperate for a lifeline, but I could feel it. The ground was about to shift. Hayes cleared his throat and began. I, Evelyn Carter, being of sound mind, declare this my final will, executed 6 weeks ago. Diane gasped, clutching her forged papers, but Hayes ignored her, reading on. To my son, Charles Carter, I leave a complete set of your fraudulent investment ledgers, retrieved from your office dumpster. May they serve as evidence in the SEC investigation I've initiated with a detailed report. Charles choked, a guttural sound, his face purple. He slammed his fist on the table, toppling a water glass. This is insanity, he roared, but Hayes continued, unflinched. To my daughter-in-law, Diane Carter, I leave the hospital gala's missing donor list, cross-referenced with your jet lease agreement. A copy has been sent to the district attorney. Diane's hands flew to her pearls, her breath hitching, tears smearing her mascara. She looked like a statue crumbling. Hayes's voice stayed even. To my grandson, Ethan Carter, I leave a hard drive of your warehouse surveillance footage showing stolen cars being dismantled. The FBI's auto theft division has been notified. Ethan lunged to his feet, his chair crashing backward. You can't do this, he shouted, veins bulging. Lucas beside him just stared at the floor, shaking. To Lucas Carter, Hayes read, I leave a ledger of your illegal car part sales with buyer names. The police are expecting a delivery. Natalie, Ethan's wife, sat frozen, her tablet forgotten, as Hayes turned the page. To my beloved grandson, James Carter, the only one with the courage to speak truth, I leave everything else. The words hit like a thunderclap. Everything else, Hayes clarified, consulting a summary, includes the penthouse on Pine Street, all financial accounts, stock portfolios, the yacht Blue Horizon, the classic car collection, and 4 safe deposit boxes at Wells Fargo. The estate's net value, as of yesterday's market close, is $7.2 million. Chaos erupted. Charles surged across the table, a primal roar tearing from his throat, his hands reaching for me like claws. Mr. Hayes, quick for his age, stepped between us, shoving Charles back. Enough, he barked. Diane wailed, a raw, ugly sound, collapsing into her chair. Ethan threw his phone at the wall, the screen shattering. Lucas grabbed Natalie's arm, muttering, We're done, we're done. In the safe, Fitzy Evelyn's insurance loomed on the table, its contents a death sentence for their lies. Bank records, surveillance, affidavits, all ready for the FBI. I stood, heart racing, but my voice was steady. She saw you for what you are, I said, looking at Charles. Thieves, liars. You thought you'd buried her truth, but she buried you. The room spun, their empire in ruins, and for the first time, I felt Evelyn's strength in me. The will wasn't just money, it was justice, and it was mine to carry. It's James Carter, and in that Seattle law office, the dust hadn't even settled from Evelyn's will dropping like a bomb. $7.2 million to me, nothing but shame for my family. The conference room was a war zone. Charles slumped in his chair, face purple with rage. Diane sobbed, mascara streaking her cheeks. Ethan and Lucas glared, their empire of lies in ashes. The safe on the table, packed with Evelyn's evidence, loomed like a guillotine. I thought the fight was over, but my family had one last desperate play, and it was dirtier than anything I'd seen. Diane stood, her trembling hands clutching a USB drive, her eyes glinting with a venomous spark. You think you've won, James, she hissed, her voice low and dangerous, a far cry from her usual polished act. She slid the drive toward Mr. Hayes, who raised an eyebrow but took it. Play it, she demanded, her lips curling into a smirk. It's a video of James screaming at Evelyn, threatening her in her own penthouse, recorded last year before she conveniently changed her will. The room snapped to attention. Charles straightened, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Ethan sneered. "Yeah, let's see how essential you are now, brother." My stomach dropped. A video? I'd never raised my voice to Evelyn, let alone threatened her. But their confidence, the way Natalie nodded smugly, made my blood run cold. Mr. Hayes plugged the USB into his laptop and the screen flickered to life. There I was, or someone who looked like me, in Evelyn's penthouse, yelling, "You'll regret crossing me, Grandma." The voice was off, the lighting strange, but it was convincing enough to fool a stranger. The footage cut to Evelyn, looking frail, clutching her brooch in fear. My family leaned back, triumphant, as if they'd just flipped the board. "That's fabricated," I said, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at me. "I was never there." "You know it." Diane laughed, a brittle, theatrical sound. "Oh, James, it's your face, your voice. We'll take this to court, to the press. You'll lose everything, unless you split the inheritance. Half, and we destroy this." Charles nodded, his voice oily. "Be reasonable, son. You don't want to be the monster who terrorized a dying woman." I looked at Mr. Hayes, expecting doubt, but his eyes were calm, almost amused. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thin report, sliding it across the table. "Evelyn's PI was thorough," he said. "This is a forensic analysis of your video, conducted 2 weeks ago. The audio is spliced, voice modulation, inconsistent waveforms. The visuals, deep fake artifacts in the pixel patterns. Evelyn had it analyzed when you first tried this stunt with her." He turned to Diane, his tone icy. "Perjury and evidence tampering carry heavy penalties, Mrs. Carter. Shall I forward this to the DA with the safe's contents?" Diane's smirk vanished, her face paling to chalk. Charles gripped the table, his knuckles white. Ethan cursed under his breath, while Lucas just stared, defeated. Natalie's tablet slipped from her hands, clattering to the floor. "You're bluffing," Diane stammered, but her voice cracked, her bravado gone. Hayes shook his head. "Test me. The safe's evidence includes your email to a video editor, Mrs. Carter, with instructions to make James look violent. It's over." I exhaled, the weight lifting. Evelyn hadn't just outsmarted them. She'd predicted their every move. "You can't even fake the truth," I said, looking at Diane. "That's why she chose me." The room was silent, their last gambit shattered. My family's desperation had only dug their grave deeper, and I was done playing their games. "Hey, it's James Carter," and in that Seattle law office, the air was thick with defeat. My family's blackmail attempt, a fake video of me threatening Grandma Evelyn, had just crashed and burned, exposed as a cheap deepfake by Evelyn's foresight. The safe's evidence, stacked against them, was a guillotine waiting to drop. Charles sat hunched, his face a mask of impotent rage. Diane's sobs were silent now, her hands trembling. Ethan and Lucas stared at the floor, their bravado gone. Natalie, my sister-in-law, clutched her broken tablet like it could save her. They'd lost everything. Evelyn's $7.2 million, their lies, their power. But I wasn't done. Evelyn had trusted me to carry her truth, and I had one final test for them. I stood, my boots steady on the marble floor, and looked at each of them. My voice was calm, but it carried the weight of 6 months of pain. "You've lied, stolen, and betrayed everyone who ever trusted you," I said. "Evelyn saw it. I see it. But I'm giving you one chance. One to prove you're not the monster she said you are." Their heads snapped up, eyes flickering with desperate hope, like drowning men spotting a rope. Charles's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, waiting. Here's the deal, I continued, my gaze locking on my father. Charles, you'll drive with me to the Hendersons' house tonight. You'll knock on their door, get on your knees, and apologize for stealing their retirement. You'll admit every scam, every dollar you took, in front of their neighbors. I turned to Diane, her face pale as death. Mom, you'll go to the hospital board tomorrow, stand before the gala donors, and confess you embezzled their cancer ward funds. No excuses, no tears, just the truth. I faced Ethan and Lucas, their fists clenched. You two, you'll turn yourselves in to the police. Hand over your chop shop records, name your buyers, and face the veterans whose cars you stole. The room was a vacuum. Every breath held. Natalie's eyes darted to Ethan, but he wouldn't meet her gaze. I leaned forward, my voice rising with steel. Do this. Not with lawyers, not with spin, but with raw, ugly honesty. Own your crimes. Make restitution with whatever dignity you've got left. Do that, and I'll consider helping you, not with Evelyn's money, but with a path forward. Refuse, and you're on your own. Charles was the first to break, his laugh bitter, venomous. You self-righteous punk, he spat, standing so fast his chair tipped. You think you're better than us? You're nothing. A greasy mechanic playing saint. Diane's voice was a whisper, but it cut. James, we're family. You can't humiliate us like this. Ethan sneered. Go to hell. We'll sue you into the ground. Lucas just shook his head, muttering, You're delusional. Their words stung, but they were hollow. I saw them clearly now. Souls so twisted they'd rather burn than face the mirror. Evelyn had warned me. They'd choose greed over grace every time. I looked at Mr. Hayes, who watched with a quiet nod, his eyes saying he'd seen this coming. I have my answer, I said, my voice final. You're exactly who she said you were. I turned to the safe, its contents a silent promise of justice. Mr. Hayes, let's move forward. They didn't beg or plead. They just glared, their hatred a weight I no longer carried. I'd given them a chance, not for them, but for Evelyn to prove her wrong. They'd failed, and I was free. The truth was my shield, just like she'd said, and I was ready to wield it. It's James Carter, and in that Seattle law office, the silence was deafening after my family rejected my final offer. Charles's bitter laugh, Diane's whispered pleas, Ethan's threats. They'd chosen their poison, proving Evelyn right. The safe's evidence sat on the table, a ticking bomb ready to bury them. I'd stood my ground, ready to walk away. But the fight wasn't over. As my family gathered their things, their faces twisted with defeat and rage, a new player stepped into the ring. One I never saw coming. Aunt Clara, Evelyn's older sister, had been a ghost through the will reading, sitting in the corner, her frail frame hunched, her eyes fixed on her folded hands. She'd said nothing when Evelyn's video played, nothing when the will stripped my family bare. I'd barely noticed her, assuming she was just another bystander in their drama. But as Charles stormed toward the door, Clara stood, her voice thin but steady. Wait, she said, and the room froze. Her hand shook as she pulled a small recorder from her purse, its red light blinking. James, you need to hear this. My family's eyes widened, confusion turning to dread. Clara pressed play, and Charles's voice crackled through the device, recorded just minutes ago in the hallway during a break. We'll ruin him, he hissed, his words slurred with fury. Lawsuits, leaks, whatever it takes. He'll wish he never stepped foot here. Diane's voice chimed in, cold and sharp. We'll dig up dirt, make him the villain. The press loves a fallen hero. Ethan's low growl followed. I know guys who can make his shop disappear. One fire and he's done. The recording ended, and the room felt like it had been sucked dry of air. Clara's eyes met mine, glistening with tears. I'm sorry, James, she whispered. I sat silent at that Christmas Eve dinner when you called them out. I saw Evelyn's pain, your courage, and I did nothing. I was a coward. She handed me the recorder, her hands steady now. I recorded them after the video played, when they thought no one was listening. It's not much, but it's proof of their threats. Use it to protect yourself. Charles lunged forward, snarling, "You traitorous old hag!" But Mr. Hayes stepped in, his arm barring the way. "That's enough," Hayes snapped, his voice like steel. "This recording strengthens James's position against any retaliation. I'd advise you to walk away, Mr. Carter, before you add extortion to your charges." Diane's face crumpled, her mask of composure gone. Ethan and Lucas exchanged panicked looks, while Natalie just stared, her hands shaking. I took the recorder, my chest tight with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you, Aunt Clara," I said, my voice thick. "This means more than you know." She gave a small nod, her lips trembling. "Evelyn always said you were her heart, James. I should have stood with you sooner." Her words hit like a wave, washing away the last of my doubts. Evelyn hadn't just left me her fortune, she'd left me an ally, someone who'd seen the truth and finally found her voice. As my family filed out, their threats reduced to mutters, I felt a shift. Clara's courage, small but fierce, was a spark of hope in the wreckage. It wasn't just me against them anymore. Evelyn's legacy was growing, pulling in those who valued truth over greed. I looked at Mr. Hayes, who gave a quiet nod, and I knew. This was the moment I stopped running and started building. "Hey, it's James Carter," and as I left that Seattle law office, the rain had stopped, leaving the city air sharp and clean. Aunt Clara's recorder was heavy in my pocket, her unexpected courage a lifeline I hadn't expected. My family's threats echoed in my mind, but they were just noise now. Evelyn's will, her safe, and Clara's evidence had stripped them bare. I wasn't the outcast anymore. I was the one carrying Evelyn's legacy, and I knew exactly what to do with it. The $7.2 million wasn't just money. It was a tool to right wrongs, to rebuild what my family had broken. A week later, I sat in a sleek office across from Rachel Kim, a forensic accountant with a no-nonsense stare and a knack for unhangling financial messes. We weren't celebrating my windfall over champagne. We were laying the foundation for the Evelyn Carter Justice Fund, a trust to make whole every victim of my father's scams. Rachel pored over Evelyn's PI reports, cross-referencing bank records to identify families like the Hendersons who'd lost their savings to Charles's lies. "We'll repay every cent," I told her, "plus interest for the years they suffered." As I signed the papers, transferring millions into the trust, I felt no loss, only purpose. This was Evelyn's wish, her way of cleaning the slate. That same afternoon, I drove my beat-up Bronco to a quiet suburb south of Seattle, where modest bungalows lined the streets. I parked in front of a small house with a tidy lawn and a rose bush blooming defiantly in the October chill. Mrs. Larson, one of Charles's victims, answered the door, her face lined with years of worry. She recognized me instantly, her eyes wary. "James? What's this about?" I handed her an envelope from the Justice Fund, my voice steady. "Mrs. Larson, my grandmother knew what my father did to you. This is from her. A check to cover what he stole, plus enough to clear your debts." She opened it, her hands trembling, and gasped at the number. It was enough to pay off her mortgage, to live without fear. Tears welled in her eyes, and she tried to push the envelope back. "I can't take this, James. It's too much." I shook my head, my throat tight. "It's not from me. It's from Evelyn. She wanted you to have your life back." Mrs. Larson's face softened, a smile breaking through. "Your grandmother was an angel, and you're just like her." We sat in her cozy living room, sipping tea as she told me stories of Evelyn's kindness, how she'd visited when Mr. Larson was sick. I left her house lighter, the weight of my family's sins lifting with every wrong I righted. Back at my shop that night, I found a package on my doorstep, wrapped in brown paper, my name scrawled in Evelyn's elegant cursive. Inside was her journal, its leather cover worn soft. I opened it, heart pounding, and found an entry from the day after that Christmas Eve fight. "James stood tall tonight," she wrote. "He faced their greed with the courage I wish I'd had sooner. I've been blind, but no more. He's my legacy, the only one who sees people, not dollar signs." Tears blurred the page. All those months I'd thought she'd turned away. She'd been fighting for me, planning this justice. I moved into her penthouse the next day, its walls filled with her books and jazz records. It wasn't home yet, but it was a start, a place to build something honest, something hers. It's James Carter, and as I sit here in Evelyn's penthouse, the Seattle skyline glittering through the windows, I'm still processing everything. The $7.2 million, the safe full of my family's secrets, Aunt Clara's recorder, Mrs. Larson's tearful smile. It's been a wild ride. Evelyn didn't just give me her fortune. She gave me a mission to rebuild what my family tore down. Starting that justice fund, seeing the relief in Mrs. Larson's eyes, it's like I'm finally living the way she always believed I could. But this story isn't just mine. It's for anyone who's ever had to stand up for what's right, even when it costs everything. So, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to speak the truth, knowing it might leave you standing alone? Maybe it was calling out a wrong at work, or standing up to someone you loved. Drop your story in the comments below. I'm reading every one. And if this story hit you, give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support keeps this journey going, and I'm grateful for every one of you out there. Here's the biggest thing I've learned through all this. Truth is your greatest weapon. It's not easy. It can burn bridges, break hearts, and leave you raw. But it's also the only thing that sets you free. My family chose lies, and it chained them to their greed. Evelyn chose truth, and it built a legacy that's changing lives. So, whatever you're facing, hold fast to what's real. Speak it, live it, even when it's hard, because in the end, a life built on truth is the only one worth living. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.